Will you just introduce yourself to start off? I guess who you are and what Amandla is.
So I'm Koketso Moeti, based in Johannesburg, South Africa, but not from Johannesburg. Yeah, I am the ED of Amandla.mobi. We run mobile, multilingual, multi-issue campaigns on issues that impact those most affected by injustice, which are low-income Black women. We actually stopped working from the office before the lockdown officially happened. So part of the reason for that is all of us at the office are public transport users. There are people who are, high risk in a number of ways, and a significant number of us all live with elderly people. So like my grandmother, another colleague has her grandparent and so on, And then the lockdown as well impacted on childcare, given that schools were closed, which again, in an office that is predominantly staffed by Black women, has serious childcare implications. So what we did by closing a bit earlier was, one, to protect the team, of course, but then number two, to also give us time to prepare the team for working at home. So we had to look at things like, how do we move office furniture to people's homes? Because the reality is that, I didn't even have a desk, So you don't want to be asking people to be like working from their beds, working uncomfortably. You don't want to create a whole new set of problems. So that time, by closing that early, it gave us time before the official lockdown to ensure that everybody was comfortably set up at their home, which was very, very helpful. There's a hyper focus, rightfully so, on serving immediate needs. But what I'm not seeing is people connect the dot of the immediate need to the bigger, beyond this individual crisis. What are the gains we can make that go, the structural gains we can make that go beyond the crisis? So I think right now, issues of labor, issues of transportation, there's just so many things that we can go for. Even if you think about how hunger across the world is becoming a huge thing as the informal sector collapses, which is the biggest employer of the global workforce, right? One of the ways we approach campaigns is thinking about it like a dance floor. How do you both dance on the dance floor, but you stay on the balcony so that you can see the bigger picture, right? As I've mentioned, we've been deeply concerned about, limiting the actions we take now to only being about the crisis. Because as you've pointed out, it's amplified what has been already existing. Hunger in this country has been a massive problem for years now, it's the biggest killer of kids between 0 and 14 in the Northern Cape. So it's like looking at the bigger picture as well on how are we taking this campaign issue or this issue and lending it to bigger term change. But over and above that, it's also, I think there's a big thing about narrative and the narratives that consume us, because suddenly governments across the world, including South Africa, things that have been said are not possible were suddenly made possible, right? There's communities out here who've been without water since the democratic government took over in 1994. Suddenly they were being supplied with water. Do you know what I mean? And it also gave us an opportunity to shape a narrative about possibilities, about the bigger vision beyond, what is currently happening. So it's this weird thing about this crisis, right? I am terrified, I am horrified, and all of that. But at the same time, I think in my lifetime, at least, this is one of the biggest opportunities for change that I have ever been a part of. For years, we've been doing a lot of work around tax justice and illicit financial flows. So one big example is some of the money that has gone out just in 1 year, would be more than enough to plug the fiscus hole, the fiscus deficit that we're currently facing, It's such an opportune time to talk about wealth and redistribution as well. For every problem we pose to government and point out that actually this is what you should do, we often offer solutions. So one example is the pensioners campaign, right? Where we were arguing for pensioners to get a 13th check, for example, in December. The reason being kids aren't at school, and as you know, if kids aren't at school, groceries goes more, the cost of starting a new school goes up, and so on. We calculated it at an estimated 5.2 billion to give every pensioner this. And what we found is that the money that was used for their failed e-toll services was the equivalent of that. If government scrapped that and actually prioritized poor people in this country, right? We would actually be able to fund this. So a lot of the things about the money is actually, it's a problem of priorities.
In addition to running a fellowship program yourself, you are also a fellow, an Obama Foundation fellow, along with leaders, civic leaders around the globe. In conversation with peers or in looking at social media, is there anything that strikes you as unique about how South Africa is experiencing or responding to COVID?
So it's been very interesting because I think in a lot of places, you know, if you're thinking about like the US, Brazil, and the UK, the bar is so low that it doesn't matter how bad South Africa's response is, it will be seen to be amazing. Do you know what I mean? It's a weird, weird thing that globally there is such a deficit of leadership that a president only literally needs to burp and people will clap hands. So that's just been very fascinating for me to observe, you know, just kind of like, I've experienced what leader envy, you know, where people are like, oh my God, South Africa's taking such decisive steps and all of that. And then you're looking around and looking at your people being humiliated by cops and being abused by the defense force. There was this meme that was made, you know, and it shows a father and his two kids, and the boy sitting on his lap, or one of the kids sitting on his lap. And then the child says, I don't want to go to school, Daddy. And then the father says, well, I went to school through a pandemic. And then the other kid says, okay, Zoomer. You know, it was just very, it was just very, it was interesting for me because it was just like, okay, the kids who suddenly aren't going to school, like this has just never happened, you know, in our lifetimes. Suddenly, you know, everything being shut down, billions of people unable, having their movement restricted in such a way. I mean, yeah, it's huge. So I do think the consequences will live for much longer than I think we are actually aware of right now. You know, people are retreating into narrow national borders, which scares me, This is a global pandemic, you know, and some of the much more structural issues, whether we're talking about, you know, white supremacy, and these are global problems, you know, whether we're talking about tax justice. The company we're complaining about now has headquarters in the UK, you know, these problems are global in nature. Now is not a time to retreat into narrow national borders. And I do think that there should be much more of an intentionality around transnational solidarity, transnational justice. And you know how we talk about this virus doesn't respect borders and it just moves and whatnot, you know? And it's just like, okay, we are so much more powerful than this damn virus. And what does that mean for us? You know, what does it mean we need to move beyond, you know? Yeah, yeah.